Hello and welcome to today's video on Solo, a Star Wars story. Today, before we get into it, I want you to be forewarned. We are doing a deep dive, so we are doing absolute full spoilers here. I, of course, am Mr. Nose. This is Andrew, and a little bit on Solo. It was released on May 25th, 2018, which was exactly 41 years to the day of the release of Episode 4, A New Hope. It currently sits at a 70% on Rotten Tomatoes out of 445 reviews. So, with that being said, what did you think of Solo?
I liked it a lot better than I expected to. Um, Prior to its release, got a lot of bad review from critics, fans, you name it. They were trying, basically shooting it down before it even came to theaters. Part of that was with, losing the original directors due to, what was it? Wanted to turn it into a comedy movie.
That was one of the things they stated, yes.
Kind of the same mistakes of, Lucas trying to turn Indiana Jones into a funny movie when all you needed was the dry humor of Harrison Ford.
Yeah, I've already talked my piece on the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
But I didn't see it in theaters. Things came up in my personal life on top of that. The negative reviews caused me to just say, it's not really worth it. I really wish I had seen it in theaters. It's a lot better than people made out, and I'm kind of glad to see that Rotten Tomatoes score is a lot higher than I expected it to be.
I did catch it in theaters. And this was the first Star Wars film that I've seen in theaters that I can remember saying, yeah, I don't need to see that in theaters again. It wasn't a bad film. It just didn't feel Star Wars. It was a backstory that I didn't think we needed. I thought in the original trilogy, I thought Han Solo had enough to him. I just didn't need it. But with that said, it was better than it had any right to be. And you are not wrong about the review bombing that it got in protest of The Last Jedi. So people just fandoms, which is now becoming a toxic four-letter word, has decided, well, they decided that we shouldn't watch it, and then we'll get films that we wanted. That, I don't think, was the biggest problem of this film. I think this film didn't make a lot of money, not because it was 4 months, 5 months after Last Jedi. It's because they didn't start the marketing until 3 months before the film released.
Mm-hmm.
The very first ad that I saw for it, and I don't mean just like a 30-second TV spot. I mean full trailer, was when the Super Bowl hit in February. You can't make money on a movie in that short a time frame. I liked Alden was alright as Han. I mean, he played him in his own style, and Han isn't the Han that we knew, so I was okay with the changes that he made. Donald Glover, perfect casting as Lando. He worked out great. And I actually liked Emilia Clarke as Kira.
Mm-hmm.
I doubt they're going to make a sequel, but I hope just a short run on Disney Plus. Give me an 8 to 10 episode series to round out some of the story threads they left with Kira, and not so much with Lando because
self-explanatory.
It was enough. But I want to know more about Kira. I want to know more about the Crimson Dawn.
Maul.
Well, the thing about Maul.
Well, before we get there, I do want to agree with your statement on the fact that it definitely does not feel like a Star Wars film. But it isn't the same as watching any of the other movies.
Even Rogue One.
Yeah, it's... Well, and I mean, Rogue One isn't even in the style of a Star Wars movie, but we'll get there on our next review. This one just... It's Star Wars, it's a different flavor. And I don't have an issue with it.
That's not a bad thing.
No. It's its own take. I mean, it's supposed to have its own take. It's supposed to be the spin-off. I mean, you can't have space opera for every movie if you're going to continue something.
I think the biggest issue outside of the marketing with the production came to the fact that yes, they let Lord and Miller go, and they essentially reshot the whole film. This film lost so much money not because it did horribly, which it didn't do great. You have to think this movie released 3 weeks, 4 weeks after Infinity War, and 2 weeks after Deadpool 2. It was a bad time for a Star Wars film to make money.
With all the further delays in regards to Star Wars films, they could have easily waited 6 more months, continuing marketing.
Oh yeah, they could have pushed it back to December. They didn't have anything in December 2018.
Nope.
They'd have went against Aquaman, I think, was the big... There was a few number of films that released in that December, but Aquaman was the main moneymaker.
It would have kind of healed the wounds that I feel like fans may have felt when the announcement came 6 months after the movie came out about, yep, we're not doing any more spin-offs for a little while. And it almost felt like they were blaming Solo for it.
Yes.
Because Solo failed, we're just not going to go that route for a little while. We're going to finish this current trilogy and then rethink our options. The problem there is you got hesitancy.
Yep.
And you lose trust. At that point, everyone's going, oh, so you think the movie failed, so what? Now you're just going to revamp everything and leave us kind of hanging for the next couple of years. Yeah. Other than, Rise of Skywalker.
We have the Rise of Skywalker, but we actually have more coming before Skywalker. The Mandalorian will release when Disney Plus runs on November 12th. And they're doing a staggered release of one episode per week, which November 12th, 10 weeks later, Rise of Skywalker. So we'll have some more Star Wars before Skywalker, but just unfortunately not theatrical releases. I guess we'll see how Jon Favreau does with this. Speaking of Favreau, he was actually in this film. He voiced oh goodness, now I can't remember the name of his character. He was the one alien in Beckett's crew, the one that had to hold up his pants.
I can't even think of his name.
I've seen it twice.
I was kind of disappointed in that regard because he was an interesting character and he lasted 30 seconds.
Yeah. Well, that was the same with Beckett's whole crew, with Val and...
Oh, yeah. You get introduced to these characters and they're dead within 15 minutes.
And they were good characters. They have a backstory that I want more into because Favreau's character makes at least two comments of a very lively backstory that he's got. He's like, you've never known... What did he say? You never know comfort until you've snuggled against a Wookiee. And then something about a Minarch barbecue.
Well, there's that, but I still swear that at some point he does mention...
Maz Kanata?
Yeah, I swear he mentions her at some point.
And I thought he said Val, so...
I don't know if that's the same part.
Well...
But, I mean, even Beckett's backstory, you get little bits and pieces, like, I didn't know he killed Aura Singh.
Yeah, I caught that the first time.
I mean, she was kind of a cult favorite for a while back in the old EU, and then all of a sudden...
Yep. She did show up a couple times in the Clone Wars cartoon. She is in the films, actually. Episode 1, she is the white-skinned bounty hunter with a little bit of a top knot during the pod racer. She's on Tatooine.
And the next time you see her in the movies, she's mentioned because, well, Beckett pushed her.
Yes, pushed her.
And the fall killed her.
Yes. Yeah. I want more. I'd like to know more on that. And there might be a comic, because I know there's a Beckett comic. I just haven't had a chance to see it. But speaking of backstory, this it starts on Corellia. And I actually like this take on Corellia because we haven't seen a Star Wars shipyard yet, a shipbuilding planet.
Yeah.
So to see the industrial aspect of Corellia and the Star Destroyers being built, they looked Imperial class to me.
Yeah. Only issue I do have with that is they kind of stole Kawat and just repurposed Corellia to use as that. Because they didn't build... I'm still hung up on Old Canaan, folks. They basically... Corellia had its own shipyard, built its own lines of ships, freighters, things like that. Even, light warships. And The Empire typically built their Star Destroyers at like Fondor and Kuat, not on Corellia, because Corellia was basically only controlled by a dictatorship. It was a little unstable.
Okay.
Whereas Kuat and Fondor loved the Empire because it made them money. I won't disagree. It was awesome getting to see, components, the shield generator systems. You get to see a Star Destroyer up above where it's framework. I mean, that was awesome. I just personally didn't like the portrayal of Corellia because it just made it look like a slum hole.
And that kind of leads us into the fact that it's run by an underground criminal named Lady Proxima. Now, don't get confused with Proxima Midnight of Infinity War. I'm sure that has happened just from the name Proxima, but I didn't notice it the first time. But she looked to be a puppet. She looked to be not fully CGI. Like her arm, like.
Oh yeah, I think she was. I think she was actually.
The only time I noticed the CGI was when Han threw that rock through the window, and she did that quick turn and started burning. It's the only time I noticed her as.
Yeah, I think for the most part it was model work.
And that's a big highlight to me out of this film. It felt real. It felt there.
Mm-hmm. No, I'd agree. Corellia, though, I could have left. And, I mean, it's nice to see Han start. And I'm sure, okay, the sections we see are like the manufacturing and the slums surrounding it. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the rest of Corellia is just this big slum hole. True. Yes, Corellia was, to some extent, I mean, even in Old Canaan, a hotbed of crime, but it was more like the organized crime. You don't go around, blowing up restaurants kind of deal. It was a little more.
You don't
much
run
more
through
organized.
A droid that's trying to stop somebody, or
yeah, it was all more under the table, but
yeah, and you're right. They were right out in front. The main goon of Proxima hit a stormtrooper in the chest in front of everybody.
Yep, and yet when they're at the spaceport, the stormtroopers look the other way when they grab Amelia Clark's character and drag her off.
Well, that brings me into. Imperial corruption. Mm-hmm. We've never truly seen it to this extent in any previous
because
film.
It's other than them hiring bounty hunters.
But that's not necessarily Imperial
corruption. That's we're utilizing a resource.
And that's not, hey, we'll give you this hyperdrive fuel to let us through, and then, she's got. Well, it didn't work. Sorry, but I'm still going to pocket this coaxium.
Mm-hmm. The reality is, okay, the Emperor wants power. Vader, one of his primary focuses is, like he said in the earlier films, I want to bring peace and order and stability to the galaxy. Well, the problem is you can build up the most powerful empire you ever dreamed of. All you're going to end up doing is the people who are in the lower orders are still going to commit crime and everything else and be corrupt because what else you got?
True. There's not much else you can be said about the Imperial corruption because we know it's there. We see it even later with Dryden. He kills a Imperial governor in the middle of a party with other Imperial officials.
Yep, nobody cares. He'll just be replaced anyways.
Mm-hmm. I do like the blades that he used. It looked like kind of like vibro daggers, and they actually showed the blades turning on, which I thought was a pretty cool.
Yeah,
and they cut through everything.
Well, you also got to look at the decor he's got.
There were a lot of Easter eggs back there. If you got
attention. Mandalorian armor in the background, which makes you wonder where that's originating
It was the bright red armor. For the most part, whenever we were looking at, and I don't know if this was framed purposefully or not, but every time we looked at Dryden, it was off to his left. Or you'd look at him, look a little bit to the left, you see a mannequin of red Mandalorian armor.
There's that. There's Sith holocron.
That's a big pyramid kind of.
And around it, you see arrayed a bunch of scrolls and papers that are all on display as well, which makes you have to wonder if those are Sith texts.
I didn't notice the paperwork, so maybe.
Well, I purposely watched. I think this is the fourth time I've seen it. Every time after I noticed that, I was paying attention to the background.
I want to know more about that blue skull. Was that crystal?
Crystal
Was that
skull
somebody's skull? Actual skull?
makes you wonder.
Well, most of his yacht, essentially, is what that ship was.
Hmm.
Made me ask questions. His guard, their armor looked pretty cool. Um, his species, like the first time I watched it, I just thought he had scars down his face, like he with something he shouldn't have and got scarred. This time I noticed he had claws. He had
Hmm.
really sharp points for
No, he's a
nails,
hybrid.
and he had. I'm guessing it was an implant over one side of his head. It looked like a big staple.
Yeah, right here. So our working hypothesis is because they talk about once you're into Crimson Dawn, you can't get out. My thought is that could just be an implant that okay, if you betray Maul, we just push a button and your head blows up. That'd be my thought.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about him since we've mentioned him twice.
Mm-hmm.
Darth Maul, Episode 1, Phantom Menace. Obi-Wan cuts him in half, and he tumbles down a reactor shaft.
I'm not going to go into a rant this time.
In the Clone Wars animated TV show, his brother, Savage Opress, finds him manic and in an animal-like state with robot legs. It's really weird. But takes him back to Danthomir, which he mentions by name in this planet, in this movie, and basically does a Danthomiri witch. Oh, dang it! I'm drawing a blank on what it's called. Uh,
Ceremony.
yeah, thank you. Uh, and basically restored his mind. They gave him new robotic legs to where he could walk upright as a bipedal. And then he decides that he is going to go against Darth Sidious and take Savage as his, essentially his Padawan, his Sith apprentice. Eventually, this leads to a battle between Maul, Opress, and Sidious in a lightsaber battle. It's actually a pretty cool battle. I'd recommend looking it up. He kills Savage, and basically threatens Maul with death. Well, I wouldn't say he threatens him. Maul's like, okay, you beat me again, kill me, I have nothing left. He says, no, I have plans for you. That's essentially what he says.
Now, is that Clone Wars or is that Rebels?
Rebels is set after this. So there is a gap between our view of Maul here and where we see Maul in Rebels. Yeah.
Wait, I'm confused.
When
You're talking in Solo or in Clone Wars?
Solo, okay, so it goes Clone Wars, Solo, Rebels.
Okay.
There is a gap between his appearance in Solo and where we find him in Rebels.
Okay. All right.
So that's another reason why I want to know more.
Yeah, if you can't tell, I haven't watched the animated series besides a few episodes of like season 1 of Clone Wars.
Not a good season.
No.
You want to get into three. 3 is where it really starts to pick up, I think.
I mean, I'm happy. I ranted in episode 1. The way I look at it is the damage was done. They did what I didn't like. But I like seeing Maul back. Maul, personally, for me, was one of my favorite characters throughout the entire series. And honestly, I kind of wish they hadn't killed him off in episode 1 originally. I liked seeing him in this. I thought he looked awesome. I still, though, don't get the whole point of we're going to have Ray Park, who has been an actor and has his own voice, but we're going to use a voice actor for...
bit of continuity here. They use the same voice actor from the Clone Wars. So, more power to Sam Witwer.
But, no, I'm happy to see him back. I kind of hope they expand upon his return, at least in a live action some way.
And I think that's where a Disney Plus series between Solo and Rebels could do well to flesh out Kira and Maul and Crimson Dawn as a whole.
Yeah.
And then every now and then you could have Han float in, because I think Alden signed a 3 film contract. Just modify that for TV. At least that's my thought.
Well, if he signed a 3-film contract, there's got to be something more coming.
Well, at least they planned it until tanked.
We'll see.
We'll see what they do.
Yeah, I mean, we'll hold our breaths.
So, speaking of fan favorites that returned, what was your feeling of Han in general? I mean, we found out how Han got his name, his blaster, and his first meeting with Chewbacca.
Yeah. We also would have found out how he got his signature chin scar, but they cut that scene from the film.
I still haven't seen that scene.
So, for those of you who haven't seen it, quick rundown. He's on a training mission in a TIE fighter. Something goes wrong. They order him to eject. He says, no, I'm a good pilot. I can land it. Crashes the TIE fighter into, the training station.
And this is why he got kicked out.
And the next scene, he's before the Moff of the station and a tribunal. And, well, he's got a nice big scar, or bleeding wound right here and some bandages. And, of course, gets mouthy with the Moff. So they basically go, all right, we'll see how your mouth is after we stick you in the infantry. And it immediately then cuts to him getting blown up on Minban.
Minban?
Yep.
So, I'm not a fan of how he got his name. Imperial recruitment. Hi, I'm Han. I would like to be a pilot, please. Where are you from? I got no one. Alright, so Han, Solo.
I actually liked it. Look, they when they changed the canon, expunged everything from the EU.
Wasn't he like a prince or descended from royal blood?
No.
Because
that was brought up in
there's something about
Courtship of Princess Leia,
yep.
in which C-3PO goes, no, Han is related to royalty. And then at the end of the book, C-3PO is all in a panic because he did some digging and realized that it was a con artist. it was like an Anastasia type thing. So basically, Han's family line was all criminals, smugglers, thieves, con artists.
Which it completely changed here
And
by
then
making
you had his
Han's
cousin,
dad,
Drakenzel Solo, was part of a rich family. And actually, in that storyline, they basically, if I remember right, set Han up as a kid and kicked him out, and then he ended up being taken in, very similar to this story, by a crime boss. And that's where the story goes different ways.
Okay. And in this one, his father was a shipbuilder. Which is why he fell in love with the Falcon.
Nostalgia. But
yep.
No, for me, I actually liked that scene in which you almost have to look at the irony of it. You can see this guy, he's a recruiter. And for me,
he just didn't care.
Well, for me, in a lot of ways, this is something I've wanted to see, is he's not a zealot. Something I've always wanted to see is an Imperial side of a story. I'd love to see a movie based on, say, an Imperial Admiral or something. So the reality is most of the movies have made the Empire out to be evil. Okay, yes, the leadership, the Emperor.
Well, they did that here, too.
The ideals are evil, yes. You can't sit and basically hammer by force law and order into people because it's, not good. But to say that every single person in the Empire who serves the Empire is evil is wrong.
Absolutely.
I mean, about the only other character I can think of who has a recurring role would be Admiral Piett. He was literally a man doing his duty. To him, the rebels were terrorists.
Yep.
But like with this guy, he's just doing his job, and for him, most of the recruits he probably figures are not going to be around in a few years. So in some ways, I almost felt a certain level of sympathy when Han goes, I don't have any people, and the guy's like, Solo.
Okay.
For me, it was a sympathetic role. It was basically, oh great, here's another kid. He's got nobody, and now he's joining us.
I wish there was just
it's different taste,
mystique on it. I didn't need it.
Yeah.
I just didn't need it. Just like I didn't need a story on how he got his blaster, where Beckett takes a long stock off of it, kisses it, and says, "Here you go, boy. Have fun."
No, I mean, it was a sniper rifle broken down into a pistol. But we've been seeing a lot of that in the new movies, the whole customization of weapons and adaptability. I mean, you got Rogue One, the sniper rifle.
Oh, the sniper rifle breakdown, yeah. But
Yeah.
I just didn't need it. I mean, like that weapon was
Well,
always Han's side piece.
but-
I didn't need to see how he got
But it's
it.
part of the mentor story. I mean, Beckett was basically the next thing to a father to him for the brief period they were together.
Yeah,
Beckett taught him basically introduced him to the real world because Han was honestly living in a fantasy world.
he was absolutely, and Kira knew it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's all, oh, we're gonna escape and we're gonna see the whole galaxy. We're gonna get a ship. I mean, none of it was realistic. I mean, he lived in a deep, dark hole.
Yep.
And was trapped in his ideals of, it's going to be a grand adventure. And you don't see him into...
Taking the Kessel Run by saying, I got a good feeling about this. Dude.
But that's the whole part of it, is that basically Beckett teaches him, shows him reality, and in the end teaches him the greatest lesson that it doesn't always work out in the end. I mean... Han learned the lesson. He shot Beckett first and learned by that afterwards. You don't give your enemy a chance to kill you.
And somehow Beckett took it like, proud of you, boy. There were some, like, Woody Harrelson is one of those actors that okay.
I love Woody Harrelson.
The acting that he did in Venom aside. Yes, he's in Venom.
I know that.
And you miss it. But it's weird. And he's got a weird orange wig. But anyway, usually he brings a feeling to his roles that is authentic. And he felt like a con artist here. And I can see that. He kept telling Han, that's not how people work. My favorite line from him goes something along the lines of, I expect everyone to betray me, that way I'm never surprised, or something like that. And that's your clue saying, hey people, he's going to betray him.
He said don't trust anybody.
Don't trust anyone, then you're never surprised.
I mean, that's the general rule. Is for him, he's been betrayed so many times and been basically left hanging off the edge of a cliff so many times. He's learned the lesson. And he's trying to teach Han because I don't think Beckett was a bad man. Beckett was somebody who lived by his circumstances. I mean, he literally said, I really was going to go home and retire.
He had his own code.
Mm-hmm.
He had his own code, and they name drop so many planets in here. Like, I don't even remember the name that he gave them. He said Scarif.
Well, Lando was Felucia.
Yep, Lando said Fluish.
They brought up Scarif in regards to trying to steal
more Caraxium. And then the name of the planet that Beckett stated, I don't even remember the name of it, but it sounded like a fun place. They went to Kessel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the name of the planet where that they did the snow job. I
don't think they ever mentioned the name.
The name of the train job.
They just kind of go there. But then you got Mimban.
Yep, Mimban.
That's been a long time name in Star Wars.
Well, this first novel was set on Mimban. Mm-hmm. And they did keep the fog with it, a lot of mud. Speaking of Mimban, that's where he met Chewbacca.
Yep.
And for the most part, I think you'll know this better than I do. For the most part, they kept it close to the original EU explanation on how they met.
I actually don't know how in the EU.
If I remember
never finished the trilogy. What I remember was that, after the first book in the Young Han Solo series, he was in love, he got married to a woman, there was crime bosses involved, and I believe she died. I can't remember. Or no, they had to split up and go their separate ways. And he joined the Imperial Academy to escape the crime bosses. Like, he literally was walking into the shuttle with, like,
kind of like
jaw
what happened
broke
here.
And everything else, yeah. Well, after he graduated the academy, at one point he sees a Wookiee being mistreated by Imperial handlers, and he had a Wookiee caretaker in that storyline when he was a kid, and she died saving him from the first crime boss that he was, like, orphaned into, And in this one, he basically fights back and rescues Chewie, and then Chewie pledges a life debt to him, which drives him insane initially, because it's, I saved your life, go home, go do whatever.
Which he kind of
but
does
he
here,
also
too,
ends
a
up
little
getting
bit.
kicked out of the academy
Yep.
for what he did.
Yep.
But
That's how I remember it. And the only detail I seem to that keeps calling out to me was that he was a lieutenant at this point.
yeah, and he had the Corellian blood stripes, which is the
red-
famous Han Solo pants. They don't really explain in this film at all, but
I don't think
they
it
probably
anywhere.
cut that out at this point. But
Possible, because I think he was wearing the blood stripes by the end of the film.
Original Kanan, the Corellian blood stripes was an honor in Corellian military or security in which you've served Corellia and are a hero.
Side note, it looks like Finn's outfit for Rise of Skywalker might include the Corellian blood stripe. At least from the art that I've seen, they might be Corellian, or at least...
Could be an homage to Han, though.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean...
Going through the Falcon and just goes...
Yeah, it could... Who knows?
Yeah.
It's hard to tell without seeing the film. So, it was alright. I could have done, though, without Han knowing how to speak Shiri Warwick. I'm pronouncing it wrong. Basically, the Wookiee language. Like, no one else seems to even be able to understand Wookiee. I think just him being able to understand Wookiee should have been enough for him to get through to Chewbacca. But I understand the story points because Chewbacca had been starved for 3 days. He wasn't thinking clearly. He's on a mud planet.
Well, there's that. There's also Han barely spoke Wookiee. He made a point of saying, I barely understand. By the end of the conversation, is he mixing up words? But it's also one of those things, he's wearing an Imperial uniform, or armor set. Chewie's not happy with the Empire. I mean, you're talking about a man who, a Wookiee who literally went from defending his homeworld from clones to watching...
defending him with clones.
Defending with, I meant to say droids. To then ending up watching his people be betrayed by the very people that he fought alongside, and then start rounding them up and selling them into slavery.
And this is roughly 13, 14, somewhere between 12 and 14 years after the battle. So we can assume that Chewbacca's been a slave for this time, for the last at least decade.
Yeah.
So I can understand why he wouldn't be so easily.
I would almost have to assume that him and what was the warrior leader of the Wookiees?
Oh, the other one that was
Tarful.
Tarful, yeah.
I would almost have to assume that him and Tarful probably led an uprising against the Empire. Tarful was probably executed, and Chewie, along with anyone else, was probably was sent into slavery. I mean, the original storyline with the EU was that the Wookiees were used to help build the Death Star.
Yep, I remember that.
You know, they were heavy labor.
Now it's they changed it from. I think they do have some Wookiees, but it's been a while since I've read about the Death Star itself. But mostly Geonosians.
Mm-hmm. But you still get to see. You know, I was content with it. I liked how they portrayed them meeting. And it's kind of it's an undertone, but you kind of get to watch and see them become friends throughout the film.
True.
Initially, it's like Han just seems a little kind of annoyed to have this big walking carpet, you know.
They give okay. I agree with Han. He could have waited to use the shower.
But he's a Wookiee. He didn't
need to force in.
Give a care.
I don't disagree. He did. Mm-hmm. And he saved his life. He saved Chewbacca's life at least twice.
Mm-hmm. On the train, he almost fell from the train.
Yep.
Or got clobbered by the rock while he was falling.
Yep.
And then I think there was another sequence on Kessel.
Well,
he also saved Chewie from Beckett. I don't think Beckett would have killed Chewie so much as just, all right, I don't need you, go. So I wouldn't really count that.
Well, I was thinking getting him off Mimban.
Yeah.
The rocks. And he let him go save his people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he helped him. He said, "Here, take this weapon.
Go do what you got to do.
I'll if you want, I'll still be working on the plan."
And in the end, it turned into a lifelong, basically, brothership.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, It's the role reversal that gets me. In the original EU, Chewie dies. He was the first major
Chewie
character.
took a moon,
Well, yeah, he stood up to a moon and got obliterated. But the
saving
point was,
Han's
yeah.
children.
And it's one of those things that it's like they specifically killed Chewie in that storyline because they wanted to shock everyone. Because
They wanted to
they
show
wanted
that,
to. It's
that
this is real.
everybody
Yeah.
is yeah.
Whereas in this film, in this current timeline, it's we're gonna kill Han Solo.
We'll get to that later.
Yeah.
Don't you worry. We'll talk about that later.
Oh,
Probably
so
a few times.
Then we have the droid uprising.
Yeah. Let's talk about how this started. I want to talk about L337 first, which, if nobody speaks Leet, it's basically replacing letters and characters with numbers, and
It's Leet.
it just comes out and says Leet, and it's hilarious to me. Londo. Hey, Han.
Londo
Han.
Calrissian.
Yeah. Well, they may. I want to speak before we get into L3. I want to take one moment about Lando that we don't really mention, because he's in love. He clearly is in love with L3, and they make him this character that's the first gender fluid. No, that's not true. That's not right. That is wrong of me to say. Absolutely. I can't think of how to word this. He's very open with his romance. He's that suave kind of character that
I think the big thing with the droid, though, is that it's unattainable. He can get almost any woman he wants, but he can't get L3 because L3 is a droid.
But L3 makes a comment to Kira about them being together, and she's like, that works? Yeah, it works.
They do the best that they can.
So there is a deep emotional that is deeper than, hey, you're my property.
Mm-hmm. It also goes a long way to explaining some things in the later films in regards to the
Your
Millennium
ship
Falcon.
has a very peculiar dialogue.
But it also comes to show why Lando still wants the Millennium Falcon all those many years later after it's been beat to crap.
Which I'm hoping we get a little bit more in Rise of Skywalker.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really what I wanted to mention with Lando, because on the top, Glover did a great job.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite part of Lando is at the end where he's looking at the Falcon. It's tore to crap, and Han's like, I like that ship. And Lando's just like, I hate you.
Mm-hmm. You wrecked my ship.
And that's where, later on, that ship is what their friendship is based around.
Yeah, pretty much. I
What you
mean,
do
we
to
don't
my
know.
ship? Your ship.
Well, I mean, the ship is the basis of it. We don't know,
True,
whether
there's
they meet
almost
up.
15 years between Solo and Empire.
Well, I would have to say, prior to Episode 4, I highly doubt they ever met up after Episode 4. The question becomes, did they ever get together in between? They had to have, because if you look at Empire, it talks about, Lando won it in some game. They had to have been talking when he was talking about Cloud
because
City.
that's
So
how
he knows
he knew
things.
how he got Cloud City. Okay.
So, I mean, either it's like a Facebook stalk. He's just kind of listening to the news, goes, that's what Lando's up to these days. But
Okay,
I would
that's
have
fair.
to assume prior to the destruction of the Death Star, they probably stayed in touch to some extent. Now, they still got the Rocky thing with Chewie, reminding Han of something, and Han going, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, and that could be explained here with how he earned the Falcon. But
Well, it's because he outsmarted Lando, and Lando's a cheat.
yeah. Yeah. But let's go ahead and dive into L3. Robot rights, right there.
Mm-hmm.
Telling robots to rise up and not be oppressed by their programming. It's
the hidden bigotry in Star Wars.
Yep.
Most people, most beings, to be fair, in the galaxy, droid's a tool. some places they don't want them. I mean, the Cantina and Tatooine, they got a droid sensor on the door that stops droids. You're not allowed in here. We don't want you here. Now, part of the reason for that is you got a lot of little conversations going on. They don't want nobody recording it.
Right.
But they're basically treated as either slaves or third-class citizens. They don't. You're not allowed to. Droids are supposed to be virtual intelligences, not AIs.
Yep. And
if you begin to develop
is...
a personality, it's time for a memory wipe.
Yep.
I mean,
yeah. You can tell she wasn't doing it on purpose, but she pops a restraining bolt off. Is it an R5 unit or R3 unit?
It was probably like
it was the dome head with a circular. It wasn't a dome head. It was like a cone head.
I'd say like an R3. I don't think it was actually an R5. The R5's got the flower pot, they called it. Like the one that blew up on Tatooine in Episode 4. It's got
it was a short. Okay, they have a shorter head.
Yeah,
okay.
That's an R5. I would have to assume this was just either a variant or an R3 or something like that. Because R4 is the ones that are permanently docked in the Jedi fighters.
Okay.
So.
But she pops the restraining bolt off, and he's like, "Well, what do I do now? I don't know. Go free your brethren." And he does. This little droid starts popping restraining bolts off droids, setting slaves free, starting a revolution on Kessel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, then I finally found my purpose in life.
She goes to start leading
and she becomes a martyr.
Yes, she does. And it tears Lando apart.
The difference is her body may have died, but she was then integrated into the computer core of the Millennium Falcon.
Which leads to probably another conversation later in Empire with 3PO saying, "Where did your ship learn to communicate? It has a very peculiar dialect. Yeah.
Dialect.
Well,
use your verbiage."
So, if you're asking why they're on Kessel in the first place, they jacked up a heist of coaxium because Han would rather live than be exploded.
Well, yeah, you actually hear Beckett yelling, "You're a coward."
Yep.
The reality was nobody was going to win that tug of war if they'd, even the swoops knew it, because the moment they released it, it's, oh crap, we got to let it go now too.
Well, they got hung up and started swinging sideways, so that was all on Enfys and her crew.
Yeah, she should have left it alone and tried to steal it later.
Yep. So this brings us into the Kessel Run, because the droid and slave uprising brought in a blockade of an Imperial cruiser. Sits right at the mouth of the standard Kessel Run. Or I believe Lando goes on and says it's 20 parsecs.
Well, it's 20 parsecs to
the safe route.
To the planet. The refinery they have to go to. But the problem is
wide enough for one ship.
We're going to go back a little bit. Everyone used to think, oh, parsec must be time. No, parsec's distance. It's a space distance. I don't know the exact amount. So when basically, and this was explained by, I think, in one of the Star Wars documentaries.
It started out as just sounding something. It sounded cool, so they used it.
Basically, the explanation became, no, it's not a matter of time, it's a matter of distance, which means that Han had to have figured out some way of getting somewhere by a faster route. Now, based in the old way, Kessel was on the edge of a black hole field, was also surrounded by a asteroid field, and the idea was there's a safe route through the asteroid field, but his Navicomputer took him a shorter distance. But nobody,
it was a race, wasn't it?
But
in the old EU?
No, it was a spice run. It was a smuggling run.
And they make mention of that about when they go into Kessel, saying we want some of your spice.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of some of the changes in regards to Kessel because of the simple fact that spice was basically a giant crystal spider's silk, and you basically would take it, you would sniff it, or I think they smoked it too.
I think it's part of
it
Death
was
Sticks.
ground. Yeah, it was ground down into a powder, could be smoked, inhaled, all these number of things, and basically would give you some level of telekinetic abilities, hallucinations, and things like that.
It brought on telekinetic abilities?
Yes.
I thought it just got you high.
No.
Well, okay.
Some of the more pure, refined stuff would give you like almost like force power in regards to psionic abilities. That's why some of the Hutts would have like their protege use it to be able to read like somebody's mind.
Oh, all right.
That's the old story. Now it just looks like spice is just some kind of mineral they mine out of the ground in the place.
But still meant as a drug.
Yeah, it's a drug. I mean, that's what gets Han in trouble later, is because he once again drops a shipment and angers a crime lord. But the thing is Han values his life more than he does credits, and values his life more than he values some criminal's enterprise. Personally, I did not like this version of the whole Kessel setup. Okay. You have this little tunnel you have to fly through to get to Kessel, which is no longer an asteroid, it's an actual planet. And originally Kessel was controlled by the Empire. In this case, it's controlled by a syndicate. And then on top of that,
Was it controlled by the syndicate? I thought it was controlled by the Empire because of the Imperial blockade. Oh, no, he did say if we go to Kessel, it'll start a gang war.
It was under control of the Pikes or something like that.
Now, did he say Pike Syndicate?
Yeah.
That's another EU deep dive.
They said Pike Syndicate. And he said, we have a fragile alliance. I don't have the power to break that alliance and start a war. But because Beckett and his troop was independent, they could get away with it. My issue okay, I can understand the whole like planetoid asteroids inside the Maelstrom, as it was called.
Basically a big storm in space.
It suddenly becomes there's these giant octopuses.
I thought that
octopi.
There was only one, wasn't there?
I could have sworn there was
I only remember one.
Way off in the distance.
Well, I thought it was all connected to one body that had like 8 eyes and.
I almost just feel like
mouth.
They went, let's pull this from the EU. There's Abeloth from the really bad final series of Star Wars. But then they turn the Maw.
Was all right.
Then they turn the Maw into one little singularity, and it's like, well, you guys could have just stuck with the Maw being multiple. They called
it by the Maw too.
Yes. And my only issue with that is when they go to escape, makes absolutely zero sense because all of a sudden you have these great walls closing like they're inside of this thing.
Well, to me, I took it as asteroids coming together because that was how they kind of played him getting out of the. Imperial ships coming at him, the TIE fighters.
There's
mosquito,
there's
or something. I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure.
But he wiped out the TIE. They were talking about there's planetoids, asteroids the size of planets colliding and grinding themselves up inside. It just felt too much to me like that whole sequence was just planned to amaze everybody. Like they tried too hard.
It was planned to give you to know what he means by 12 parsecs to the Kessel Run. Wow. I personally would have been fine not knowing this or seeing the Kessel Run not as an actual problem or him just leaving normally because then he's making up this story, which I would have been fine with. Because before this film, we didn't know if he was messing up the story because there's one sequence in The Force Awakens where Rey goes, "This is the ship that made the Kessel Run in 14 parsecs? 12! And then even here he goes, Chewbacca makes a comment and he goes, it's 12 if you round down.
Well, I feel like they forced that whole section. Okay, so basically I feel like they forced that in there. We're going to stick the whole 12 parsecs thing in by making it, you have to have, this is how much time you have to get to the refinery before you blow up. That'll work.
Oh, as needing a reason to go to make it a shorter run.
Yeah, that.
Okay, I can get behind that.
I think that's
cooking up a reason
to
do it.
Me was just, I feel like, bad writing. The rest of the movie I'm happy with for the most part. That section right there was the killer for me.
I'm surprised they didn't drop the whole engine out of the ship to begin with. How they get out through the 12 parsecs in the
Well, the
Kessel
whole
Run.
let's dump raw fuel straight into the reactor, which
They
basically, under physics, would not work because the moment that thing fired off, the
should have blown up.
gravitic forces would have just tore the Millennium Falcon apart, but we'll not go there.
So he dropped. Okay, droid uprising on Kessel. They take unrefined coaxium and try to leave through the standard drop. Imperial Star Destroyer blockades the route, and Han says, "Oh, we can just fly through the cloud." So he does this, ends up against this giant space-faring monster who's trying to eat them. So he drives towards the black hole's event horizon. Gets a little too close, shoots a big
It was the
escape pod towards it. So the monster takes off after it. It gets sucked into the black hole. This is the first time I noticed that the monster had its face sucked off.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was bad Botox, and it just pulled its face from backward. It was weird. So to get out of the event horizon, they have the
raw coaxium.
This idea to inject raw coaxium. First, somebody mentions the fuel lines, and they say no, that'll tear the ship apart.
Well, it'll blow up.
And then not if you right into the core. They do this, and it's supposed to give it. Well, it stalled the engine at first, and then goes forward. So you would think,
it was just
based on how gravity, only the engine would have shot through the ship and went through.
Well, that was my point of it. The whole thing were ripped apart. Okay, basically that whole sequence right there just defies the laws of physics in general.
As we know it. Remember, this is a space fantasy.
Yeah, I know. It's in a galaxy far, far away that isn't within our physics.
That has shields.
Yeah. Because in physics, you would never actually see the creature get eaten by the black hole. It would literally stay in the same place that you see it at the moment it crossed over. Yep. Because time dilation and all that fun stuff.
And it wouldn't have had a fiery red core.
No, it would be black.
Exactly, and it had a fiery red core.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, he makes it into almost 13 parsecs, and then he says it's 12 if you round down. So I'm guessing it was like 12.9 would be my guess. But to make it through this asteroid field took the navigation of L3.
Yep.
And without L3, they'd have never made it. They left L3.
She mapped them all.
Yep.
And originally, in the original storyline, the only way to map them all was with a Jedi.
I think Luke went in there 2 or 3 different times to the EU.
Luke, Mara, several others. I mean, there was a corridor in that storyline that actually, if you followed it, would take you to a space station where they actually designed the Death Star in the original story.
Yep. So that really brings us to the end of the film. I mean, I enjoyed that final battle between Han and Dryden.
Yeah.
Because Dryden, he has this style. He gets up close and personal, and Han's a gunslinger.
Mm-hmm.
And
Han's not a brawler.
And that really brought into, you could see it. And one of my favorite, I don't want to call it an Easter egg, but it really is they bring the name of the Star Wars fighting game from like the original PlayStation in as a martial art within the universe. Because Kira says, oh, it's Terakasi, as how she takes out the guy. And there's a Star Wars video game from like 1997 called Masters of Terakasi, which is basically a Mortal Kombat for Star Wars.
I've never heard of that.
It's just a fighting game. It's weird. And I thought that bringing that in was great. And to have Kira be the one to essentially take over that arm of the Crimson Dawn makes me want more. I want more with, at least with Kira and Maul.
Her meeting with Maul.
Yeah.
You know, over hologram. You know, I mean, she's...
Could have done without seeing his lightsaber light up, though. It wasn't needed. Wasn't needed.
Yeah, that wasn't needed for that conversation. That was more like, hey guys, Maul's back. Oh look, he's got a lightsaber.
We haven't used the lightsaber yet in this film. That's the only time anyone used the Force either.
Oh yeah, because he pulls it to him. Well, not entirely true.
Well, what are you thinking?
Personally, I want to leave this for a discussion for
Empire with the asteroid
no,
belt?
no, no. I want to leave it for Force Awakens
Really? That
because all
long?
of the evidence I want to present will have been brought up to that point.
Well,
Or
yeah,
that
that's the end of his life.
I.
Spoiler.
The point is, there's a specific point in that film that I want to bring up.
Okay.
Now, the discussion
Hashtag
we're
foreshadowing.
talking about is I have always, even before the new movies came out, I've always had this belief that Han Solo is Force latent. He's not Jedi capable, but in some ways I feel that his life, it's not that he's got good luck or bad luck, because half the time it seems like his luck is generally mixed with a good outcome. I feel like he's being guided by the Force as much as he wants to talk about it's all hocus pocus.
It's the way Qui-Gon explains Anakin to his mother. That's why he has such good reflexes, why he sees things before they happen.
And I mean, there's the
But not to that strength.
well, that's just it. Is there you have Force latents, and then you have people who are capable of becoming Jedi. I mean, that's the whole point of testing kids. You know, they test kids to see how strong their abilities are. I mean, if your abilities aren't strong enough, they're not going to take you in the Jedi Order. Yep. You can work for the Order. You can continue about your life normally. My thing with him is you have to figure about the time that he would have been tested, the galaxy's in the middle of a war. Because
for Han, because it would have been during the Clone Wars, because he was around 10.
Yeah.
The episode during Revenge of the Sith. There is actually a cut concept art of him where he was going to be part of the Battle of Kashyyyk.
And it's just one of those things of there's a lot of little things and sequences throughout all the films that just basically, I feel, just say that he's got Force talent. Not in the sense that I doubt he could reach out and touch and make things move. I don't think he could do suggestion. It's all instinct. It makes him good at what he does. Even if
cards.
Yeah, cards.
Reading
he's able
people.
to read people, his flying abilities, his intuition, a few other things I don't want to bring up because I want to have this discussion later.
Okay.
And those are like the key pieces I want to point out.
All right, with that being said, I got nothing else. You got anything else you want to bring up?
Han shot first.
Which we will get into. I am certain we will get into that during A New Hope. But with that being said, if you are enjoying our conversations, go ahead and leave a comment below. Tell us what you thought of Solo, A Star Wars Story. Join the conversation. Hit us up. You can definitely find my social media and the comments below. As always, go ahead and hit like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, have a great night.